Okay, so I would just want to say a big welcome in Sago and hello. And thank you for joining us today for the Leo Network in BC virtual gathering, exploring our relationship with fire. My name is Cody Thomas. I am a Mohawk Bear Clan from the Six Nations of the Grand River territory located in Ontario. Currently residing in North Vancouver, which is the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And I am the coordinator of the Leo Network in BC and will be the one who's guiding us through this great event today. But before any of that work, though, I think it's only right to open our event and have this conversation in a good way. So I'd like to welcome Elder Darlene to open us up with and get us started. So Darlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cody, and howdy to everybody on this beautiful Tuesday morning. In Prince George here, we have been having snow yesterday and today, and the afternoon comes and it all melts away. So winter does not want to leave too quickly this year. So in saying that, it's early in the morning and we're all having our coffee, getting back into our bodies. And so just for this moment in time, if everybody on this Zoom meeting can close their eyes just for this moment in time. So as we close our eyes and we take nice deep cleansing breath throughout our whole body, nice deep cleansing breath. And as we breathe into our body, bringing life, remembering the first day we were born, we took our first breath of life, and Creator gave us life on this earth plane. He put us here to have purpose and to continue our life in a good way. So as we breathe into our body, awakening all the cells that keep us functioning minute by minute every day. And we have to come into the place of gratitude. So as we breathe into our body, we think of all the things that we are in gratitude for. Number one, beautiful Mother Earth, who sustains our life here on this earth plane, giving us everything we need to live. A roof over our head, food, the beauty of what she brings to us. Excuse me. There are so many people in Canada who always look at the negative and, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. But yet they become part of the problem instead of the solution. Everybody has to come into the place of being part of the solution. So just imagine yourself wherever you are in BC. Go out and you're going outside early this morning. And you stand in the east direction. And that we know the sun comes up every day in the east direction. And what does it do for us? It gives us a new day, a new beginning, and new possibilities. Every day we have a clean slate to let our day unfold in a really good way. We need to remember that we have control of what we think and do. And so we start our day in a good way. We breathe into our feet. We feel our feet sink into the deep, rich soil of Mother Earth. And there we can smell the richness of her soil. We can feel it between our toes. And there Mother Earth grounds us into today, into this very moment, to what will be taking place for the next couple of hours. And as we come together, even though we're not together, but we're on the Zoom platform, we come together as one, creating that sacred space for us to do our work in. We call on Creator, the grandfathers and grandmothers, to come be with us today. Surround us with the energies of our ancestors, no matter where they're from. Let us hear you in the songs of healing, and the dance of strength. Let the fires burn, drawing in creativity and all the unique forms that create the energies that will surround the land, health, and healing gathering. Let us wrap the beautiful colors of healing around us, hearing the heartbeat of Mother Earth through the songs of the drum, bringing the energies that will refresh our spirit. Creator, thank you for this beautiful day on Mother Earth. Thank you for the gift of community. Thank you for bringing all who are present, ready and willing to work towards building a strong relationship with each other, and most important, willing to make a powerful commitment to self and those around us. May we express healing through all four corners of Mother Earth as we connect to our beautiful environment that gives us life. Our concern is for the Earth's changes in our environment. With climate change, our Earth has become fragile with what is happening as Mother Earth has been repeatedly warning us if we don't pay attention, keep consuming without regard to what carbon emission is doing, we are the losers. We take from the land the trees who preserve the erosion of the ground, flooding and landslides occur. Our trees that fill with water and moisture are being cut. Then fire occurs, giving us no protection against the elements. If only we had listened to our elders, our knowledge holders who knew how to preserve our beautiful natural environment. The time is now. Listen to the ones who know. Be proactive and not waiting for disaster to come. Creator, hear our prayers. Creator, hear our prayers. We have such an intimate connection with Mother Earth. Her trees breathe and process the carbon dioxide, which then produces oxygen so we can breathe. We breathe in, the trees breathe out. The trees breathe in, and we breathe out. We are the stewards of the land, always protecting her as she sustains our life, giving us all we need. How blessed we are. Mother Earth, as we stand on you, softly connecting with your heartbeat, thank you for continuing to support us, allowing your essence to vibrate through us, interconnecting with all that lives in and on your body. Creator, Great Spirit, hear our prayers. Creator, hear our prayers. All my relations, I see. Thank you.
Big Yawa, and thank you for that, Darlene, those great words to really, start us off and let us do our work and our journey in a good way today. So I appreciate that piece there that you shared with us all. So now that we're all set, we're in a good space for the work that we're going to be accomplishing today. We have a really great session set up for everyone. And I'd like to jump right into that now. I have to share my screen again, obviously. There we go. So a little bit of a look at today's journey and how the work is really going to go. So again, we had our welcoming and opening from Darlene. So a big nyawa and thank you again for opening us up in a good way. Following that piece, we're going to be looking at the Leo Network in BC. So that's where we're going to go over some of our updates with the platform, related observations, and starting to look at the connection of Leo, BC, and fire, essentially why we are here today. Following that piece, we're going to have a little bit of an interactive activity. And this will be a brief visual exercise to gain people's thoughts around fire and start to tease out some of those emotions, thoughts, beliefs, senses, those kind of things. So looking forward to sharing that with you all today. Following that piece, we'll be going on to our Exploring Our Relationship with Fire panel session. And here, this is where I'll introduce our awesome panel, which we have assembled today. They will share a little bit about their experiences and the work that they do, and then that'll hopefully lead into our next portion, which is the Q&A/panel discussion. And this will provide an opportunity for you as the audience to provide some of the questions that you may have to our panelists. And at this time, I'll be sort of supplementing in some questions that relate back to the themes of our event today as well. Following that, we'll do a little bit of a wrap up and a closing from Darlene to send us off back home in a good way. And that'll be our journey for today. So without further ado, I'll jump right into it. So what I like to do is provide a little bit of a quick refresher for those that may not be too familiar with the LEO network and the LEO network in BC. So the Local Environmental Observer, or the LEO network, is essentially a citizen science tool that we can use to help understand the impacts of climate change and environmental health. It's a web-based map platform that provides people with the opportunity to document and share information on the changes they see in their local environment. So when it comes to the event shared on LEO, it is very broad. So what I mean by this, you can share posts and observations on things such as wildfires, air quality, water, drought, invasive species, and extreme weather, to name a few. So when you do share an observation or post on LEO, it's connected with a LEO editor and a LEO topic expert who can help answer any questions you may have and provide additional supporting information. And these observations and posts are then shared on the LEO network and then become public for other LEO members to view and learn from. So the whole goal of this process is really to raise awareness about climate change and environmental health through the description of specific events, and as well to help connect people who can explore these events and develop specific adaptation strategies as well. So now jumping into the LEO network in BC, and I really need to say that the LEO network and the LEO network in BC are somewhat different entities. With LEO, this is where you'll go to make your observations and view them and connect with various topic experts. The LEO network in BC is somewhat different. We aim to develop our own kind of tailored resources and materials that is relevant to people here in BC. And we host our own events as well, which is like the one you are currently attending today. That being said, we still do use the interactive mapping platform through LEO, but one of the big things for the LEO network in BC is for us to raise awareness about unusual environmental change within Indigenous communities and lands, and as well to identify healthy and effective ways to address and adapt to those changes in which we're seeing today. And one of the big goals for LEO in BC is really to integrate local First Nations perspectives into observations in order to communicate environmental changes. So this platform, it will support the efforts in sharing traditional knowledge, revitalizing cultural practices, and learning from those on the lands and waters. And we don't want this just to be per se in our observations either. In the resources we develop, and whether it be pamphlets, one-pagers, or informational documents, we want that information to be included in there. And the same thing with our events as well, such as we're hosting, to have, again, showing these various knowledge systems when it comes to our work. So that being said, a good little summary resource for learning more about the LEO network and LEO in BC is our kickoff webinar, which I have an image of here you can see on the right. It provides a really good information on both tools. So I would encourage everyone, if you're still a little unsure of what the LEO network is or LEO in BC, to give that a watch. It is on our YouTube channel, our FNHA YouTube channel from March of last year. And it gives a great little piece on what we do. So I would encourage everyone to, if you're not familiar already, sign up. It literally takes like 30 seconds. It's completely free, and start to join that conversation of what's going on in our lands and waters today. So jumping into some of our updates from the LEO network in BC, we do have, I'm really excited to announce, we now have our own LEO network in BC website. This has sort of been a long time coming for us, and this will act as a one-stop shop for all things related to the LEO network in BC. It's a really great place to learn about the program itself, and we'll provide that space for updates and resources and helpful links. So I would encourage everyone to visit our website and learn a little bit more. The following piece to that as well is that we are going to be hosting the LEO Network in BC Tools Workshop Series. So this will be an opportunity to showcase not only the LEO Network, but other citizen science tools in relation to climate change and environmental health. With LEO, we want to highlight the usefulness of that and its ability for reporting, sharing of knowledge and awareness, We also want to be able to highlight another citizen science platform called Koble, which is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, which uses low-cost monitoring tools to gather precipitation, which which can be used to monitor data that can be helpful for public safety, agriculture, forestry, and flood monitoring as well. Lastly, we're going to be sharing Purple Air, which is another citizen science platform as well, that allows for the use of low-cost sensors to measure airborne particulate matter or air quality. These monitors, they provide air quality data at the local level and help for communities to be able to track, monitor, and map things such as smoke and pollution and bridge gaps in monitoring networks that may already exist. So to really bring it all full circle, the whole purpose of these workshops is they need to have a community focus in which we're going to do, with the intent to really help provide tools that aid in relation to climate and environmental health. So I would encourage everyone, if you want to learn more, do become a member, and we're going to be sharing some information out probably towards the end of May of when these dates of when these will be going on. So looking forward to putting these on for everyone to learn from. So now we're coming to making the connection. And the question is why the Leo Network in BC is hosting an event focused around fire. So when I'm talking about this, there's really three components that come to mind that really help to make that connection. The first one is with the Leo Network, we see observations coming in that are fire related. And this can be articles or observations on wildfires themselves, or aspects we may not directly think of. So things such as the potential impacts of fire can have on algae blooms, or how fires can affect the soil to the point where they can no longer absorb water, which can contribute to issues of flooding like we've witnessed, such as late last year. Seeing these alarming posts not only on Leo, but on various media outlets as well, there is a need to have conversations on these issues. So to start, we want to be able to look at the previous wildfire seasons in BC, and we want to be able to understand why they're becoming much more prevalent with high intensity with our ever-changing environment. And we want to know how to deal with this and manage these events, and what exactly does this look like for the future when it comes to fire in BC. The other connection is, and piece to this all is that that is a major component for the Leo Network, is bridging knowledge and expertise from different knowledge systems. At Leo BC, we're working to really have both Western knowledge systems and traditional Indigenous knowledge systems come together to provide more of that holistic picture in response to climate change and environmental health. And one of those areas we want to focus on with this is fire stewardship. So being able to highlight Indigenous and Western perspectives and ways of knowing around fire stewardship to really help us work with fire in a better way. And lastly, with Leo and BC, we're trying to increase awareness on climate change and environmental health, as that's a real huge component of our work today. Far too often, and you may see this in the media, they can highlight the large-scale events such as a wildfire, but often to be overlooked in this is the local and community level effects. So things such as community infrastructure, air quality, food security, and food sovereignty are just some of the aspects that may not have much light really shed on them. So with Leo BC, that's why we want to host these events such as these, to be able to create the space for this information to be shared and the awareness to be built. So now I just want to take a few moments here to share some Leo observations from the network and that relate to the pieces mentioned earlier around wildfires and related effects. So this first observation I'm sharing, I'm not going to go super in depth on it. I'm just going to give a general overview. If I would encourage everyone, I will be sharing these observations out in a follow-up document to have a look at these in a little more depth and learn more through Leo on them. That being said, the first one I'm going to share actually comes from Alaska, but it is an excellent highlight for to be used for highlighting the effects of wildfire and how they can have, I guess, that detrimental effect on food practices in community. So this observation is titled Wildfire Smoke Affecting Ability to Dry Fish, and it comes from Leo member Rosemary Atungaruk and took place in Nuiqsut, Alaska. In her observation, Rosemary goes on to share that the fish was very much easy to mold on the drying rack because the hot summer sun was not coming through the smoke. The broad white fish is what they were trying to dry at that time, and some people did salmon. She didn't get a picture of this, but she did note again that it was the white mold that grew. She has had this happen before, during rains, but it didn't rain at that time, just that it was very much cloudy and smoky. So here we're starting to see, a local observation that highlights how the wildfire affects traditional food and practices and food security. Very interesting to note. And then the Leo editor that responded to this observation was also quite surprised by this, as they knew of how unusual weather events can affect the drying of fish. But this was the first observation in which they've witnessed and seen on how smoke conditions have affected food preservation techniques. So very interesting to know. And again, I'm just sharing a photo as well of what drying fish really looks like as a traditional food practice for those that may not be too aware. The next observation I would like to show in relation to fire is the air quality advisory due to wildfire, which highlights the Elephant Hill wildfire, which occurred in 2017. And this actually comes from Leo member Neil Kane as he created this observation. He shared in July 7th, 2017, that marked the starting date of the Elephant Hill wildfire in the interior that would grow to become very substantial in size. He also shared that Kamloops is relatively close to the origin of the fire, which was approximately 1 hour west of Kamloops by car. He notes that the hot, dry summer conditions with little to no rainfall in July and August months allowed the smoke to accumulate and move inland. The provincial news also reported that at one point that smoke from fires burning in BC reached as far as Ontario. So he also notes, these air quality advisories due to seasonal wildfires may not be entirely uncommon. On August 3rd, 2017, that saw an air quality index rating of 49, which is actually one of the highest ratings ever recorded for Kamloops. So a little bit of a contrast and comparison here, you can see on the photo on the right that Neil had shared. If you look at the picture on the slide, it really provides that worrying or scary visual of just how severe the smoke was at that time. And with that in mind, a lot of pieces on human health really come to mind, and that could potentially be affected in various ways. So we can look at things such as lung irritation, inflammation, altering immune system function. So then we start to think of the people that are affected by this, infants, pregnant women, and people with respiratory illnesses can be affected by smoke. So things to really consider in all of that as well. And you can see the air quality index is a 49, which is literally off the scale at that time. And then on August 16th, when it becomes much more clear again, in a rating of 1 to 3, that is more normal of a low health risk. So quite the comparison, and a little bit worrying as well. The last observation I'm going to share is actually titled Algae Blooms Throughout BC Interior. And it's from 2017 and was documented around the Vernon area, and is courtesy of Leo member Casey Neathway. So Casey shares that a number of freshwater bodies of varying sizes have seen significant algae blooms throughout that year. Access to these water bodies for drinking water and recreation has been restricted, as some species of cyanobacteria produce microcidin toxins that are hazardous to humans and animals. Further, access to bodies of water by animals has also been restricted due to the potential for these toxins to impact livestock and pets. He also shares in one recent algae bloom noted in Douglas Lake that the number of dead fish were he notes the number of dead fish that were found near the shoreline. So as you can see here on that right image, it provides a visual of that worrying piece there. So with that noted, the Leo editor responding to this observation notes that unusual blooms of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae in lakes occurs with increases in the input of nutrients such as phosphorus from agricultural, wastewater, and most notably as well, potential disturbances to watersheds such as fires. So there wasn't a definitive answer to this observation, but it also must be noted, and we have to keep in mind that ash, sediment, and minerals from wildfire not only have the ability to flow into streams and rivers, but also downstream into lakes and reservoirs, potentially affecting drinking water and contributing to algae blooms. So good important thing to note, there's another potential direct or indirect impact of fires itself. So to bring this all full circle, I wanted to be able to share these LEO observations as a way to highlight the local response on climate change and unusual events from LEO members. We have the ability to use LEO to bring awareness to what's happening to the lands and waters today, and we can see many times that things such as food security, air quality, and watershed health can be directly impacted by these fires today. So I want to queue up a little bit of a visual exercise, and I want everyone to really get involved in this portion if you're willing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some images, and with these images, I really want you to think about what comes up for you when you see this image. You know, what kind of feelings or responses or thoughts that become noticeable? You know, what kind of senses really pop off for you? You know, is it smell? Is it kind of like a sound? And I want you to list what those in about 1 to 2 words in the chat box. And what we hope to do is after we gather all of our responses from the 3 images, we're going to share that back at the end of the presentation as a way of word art to really start to see of our relationship with fire, you know, starting to find out what those responses are, because we don't want to hear, you know, just from me or again, just on the panel in this, we want to hear from everyone. You know, this, the whole point is exploring our relationship. So at the end, let's make that happen and go through those thoughts together. So with the very first image here, as you can see, I'm not going to provide any context. I'm just going to share that. We're going to take 30 seconds to come up with your response and share what kind of feelings or whatever may be elicited at that time. So I'll leave that up for a few moments and share in the chat box if you like. So now we're going to jump to the next image. Again, what comes up for you when you see this image? Provide 1 to 2 words in the chat box, please, if you're willing. Okay, last image. Again, share your thoughts if you're willing. Okay. I want to say, I see we have a lot of responses in the chat box. So I want to say a big yeah and thank you for people taking the time to participate in that. And we're going to prepare the word art in the background on this. And I can't wait to share that out with you at the end, at the event today, to have a little bit of discussion further on that piece. So with that being done, we will jump into our exciting panel discussion. So what I will do now is I'm going to take a few moments to informally introduce a lot of our panelists. I'll just provide a few good words for them. I really want, I don't want to steal their thunder. I want them to be able to explain a lot of what they're doing and whatnot. So what we're hoping to do is I'll provide a little bit of some introductions to each of our panelists today, and they'll have 10 to 15 minutes to really highlight some of their work or experiences or insights on and experiences, knowledge, any kind of things that relate to the themes or their work, anything in that realm of fire and what they do, and be able to speak on that for 10 to 15. So following those pieces there, we'll have those little mini presentations or knowledge sharing sessions. Then we'll jump into the discussion portion of it, the panel discussion, the Q&A, and that'll provide an opportunity for our guests to be able to ask some questions of our panelists today. And I'll be supplementing in some questions that are related to our themes as well. So very much looking forward to what's to come for this. So first off, I would like to, the exciting portion of this is getting to our guests. I want to introduce our exciting panel. So the very first member I'd like to introduce is Dr. Kira Hoffman. She is an ecologist that is interested in fire behavior, pyrodiversity, and Indigenous fire stewardship. She is a conservationist and former wildland firefighter, who was born and raised in Smithers, BC. Kira is a postdoctoral fellow at UBC and in the not-for-profit Baldy Valley Research Center. And her research focuses on the understanding of historic fire activity and how fire suppression has eroded wildfire resiliency in subboreal forests across British Columbia. So actually, yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, sorry, just quick change of pace. Kira, you can take it away, and then we'll introduce the panel afterwards, the following panel members after you from there.
Hi, everyone. Just make sure everyone can hear me. Great.
Yep.
Nice to be with everyone today. I'm joining you from Wet'suwet'en territory in the house of Gitendenu clan in Smithers, where I currently live and where I currently am and learning more about fire. And I also, many of my experiences in present and in my past have also been really embedded in Gitanyao and Chazlata territory as well. I have been mesmerized and always into fire from a very, very young age. I was very fortunate that my parents, growing up on a farm in northern BC, my parents we burned a lot. And I was taught from a young age that fire is really a healthy component of ecosystems. And although we often, didn't always know what we were doing, it seemed, just that from a young age, understanding the benefits of fire, I think really helped shape me and how I felt about fire. When I became a wildfire fighter, I kind of realized, well, this isn't really what I thought fire should be like. This isn't really like the teachings that I've had in fire. We're going out and we're putting out these fires that just seems like they need to burn. And that really, really sparked my interest in fire ecology. And I really kind of went into my fire ecology career from a biophysical standpoint. So I was really interested in the science of fire behavior and fuels management and all these things. But during my PhD, I was really fortunate to learn from Healthsick knowledge holders and Indigenous fire practitioners, as well as Nuwak and the Wikanu Nation. I was just really embedded in a fire stewardship system that really made sense. And it's really shaped a lot of my experiences kind of since then. BC, everyone's been here in the last 5 years, we've had the 3 worst and most impactful wildfire seasons on record. It's affected everyone. And we've seen direct fatalities. We've seen an area burn the size of Vancouver Island. We've lost lives in wildfires. We've had whole communities burned down, and it's been very, very, very sad to see. We've lost endangered species. We've lost entire ecosystems. We've in the community of Smithers, we've had people who have had to leave their communities and not just travel, 10 kilometers down the road. They had to travel 1,000 kilometers when they left Telegraph Creek. People that were really still dealing with a lot of deep, deep issues about leaving community, leaving home, being forced to evacuate from a wildfire. And so my work is collaborative. It's about trying to understand other ways of living with fire outside of Western fire perspectives, because they're incredibly limited. We're really good at suppressing fires, or we have been for the last 100 years, and that's natural and cultural fires. But that's really changed in the last 5 years. We are having we're getting into the unsuppressible, out of control wildfire territory. And we need to really change our perspective. And, it really upset me, I think, last year in 2021, when, a lot of the communities impacted, they've been asking to burn for a really, really long time. They've been putting in those permit applications for Indigenous fire stewardship or cultural burning, repeatedly denied. And, I hear from agencies all the time, we can't really burn as much as we should be because we don't have the, the experience. We've lost a lot of our, in-house prescribed burners, and it's just a complete neglect for the understanding of Indigenous fire stewardship, the wealth of place-based expertise and knowledge, and the technical knowledge that exists with Indigenous fire practitioners within many of the communities throughout British Columbia. We're at a place where it's really time to shift. We're Western perspectives, they're just not working and they can't work alone. We just put out a paper, it came out last week, and I think Joe is actually on here, but he is one of our co-authors who just, provided us and this whole collaborative team, which includes Indigenous fire practitioners, fire scientists, lawyers. It's all about the right to burn. So how burning is really embedded in sovereignty, in food security, as Cody mentioned. And it's all about, coming together. And so this is our kind of, we talk about the barriers. We talk about some of the major barriers to revitalizing Indigenous-led, and I really focus on the Indigenous-led part, fire stewardship, but also some of the opportunities. And so we see this as, the way that fire should be, because it always has been that way in many, many places. So the idea that fire is never just seasonal, it's always with us. And I just like to really highlight Dr. Amy Cardinal Christensen from the Métis Nation, who really, supported and co-led this work, coming out with a lot of these ideas, and just many of the co-authors who just share their experience about their own barriers to engaging in fire. But they're just understanding that, there's always going to be fire suppression. We're always going to need it to protect communities, but we can do these preventative fire stewardship techniques. We can be part of a larger system of fire that, depends on lightning ignitions. Those aren't bad, those are helpful. It's doing the work that it should do. Lightning happens, those fires need to burn. And those fires are part of that system, Indigenous fire stewardship. There's a lot of room for other types of fire stewardship. So be that prescribed burning and other types of controlled fire that are done, in a really good way and under, the guidance and experience of, Indigenous land managers, because what we need to burn across broader territories and not just limit our mitigation and our fuels work to just, the small area around communities. And so this is really explores kind of how, again, we just need to shift and change our relationship with fire, understand the benefits, understand it as kind of a life-giving gift and not this really devastating disaster, which has all these cascading impacts. And so we're really at this pivotal point where we can kind of choose to do things in a really, really good way, because it's just proven time and time again that the other way is just not working. So I'll just leave it there, and yeah, I'm happy to, I think Cody's shared maybe the publication, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions later about it.
Muted as usual. Thanks for those insightful words on your work and experiences, Kira, and it's very much relevant to our conversation that we're having today. So The paper that and the resource that Kira has mentioned is actually The Right to Burn: Barriers and Opportunities for Indigenous-Led Fire Stewardship in Canada. And we're trying to share that through the chat right now. I know we're having some technical difficulties, but if not, we're sending out sort of a post-event package that'll have some helpful links. And then so we'll be including it in there as well. And the other thing I want to mention is that, Kira, you did mention Dr. Amy Cardinal Christensen, and she is a star in the world of, this kind of work that you had mentioned. And one of the things I also want to put out there for people is that if you are interested in learning more about Amy's work too, do visit the Good Fire podcast and what she puts on. Is that's a really good talk and looking into those different techniques and, and knowledge systems that goes into that. So I'd encourage that through there as a little bit of additional information. So thanks again for that, Kira, and we'll be hearing more from you soon. But right now we will jump into our next panelist, and I want to introduce Jordan Koble. Jordan is from West Bank First Nation and graduated from the Adult Immersion Language Program at the Sillis Language House. He also graduated from the University of British Columbia with a BA in Cultural Studies. He is a counselor at West Bank First Nation, is also the president of Natilix Resources LP. Jordan and NRLP were very much instrumental in using hand-treated mitigation work that was informed by traditional practices to help slow the Mount Law wildfire spread and reduce its intensity. So, Jordan, pleasure to have you here. I'd like to turn it over to you to share a little bit about your knowledge and experiences and all of that great stuff.
Thank you very much, Cody. I'm jumping and driving already this morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm really grateful to be here and grateful to be invited to speak and share a little bit of knowledge. Don't really have extensive background in forestry practices, so as much as I get kind of tagged along with the fire mitigation work for the Mount wildfire that took place this past summer, it really wasn't me. It was many of our community leaders that have done the work. Former council member Mick Werschik actually was the gentleman, and his small crew were the people that went out into the land and did the fire mitigation work. So I'm not here to accept any kind of awards on that regard. I'm just here to relay the good work that's been done that I've been able to kind of inherit and move forward with. But I'm really proud of our resources group, our NTTE resources group. It's a community-driven corporate entity of West Bank First Nation, and so it started out as basically an exercise of our rights and responsibilities in the forest by claiming our land in the community forest and claiming a community forest for ourselves. And then from there, we've grown from supporting our local contractors, our West Bank First Nation member contractors, to actually implementing traditional knowledge forest stewardship practices within our community forest, which includes the fire mitigation work that was done in the Glen Rosa area. The Mount Law forest fire and impacted those lands there. But it's knowledge that is, the work that's being done now predates who I am, but our knowledge predates us as a people. And so that's where we really want to center the mandate for NRLP and just the community moving forward. We want to make sure that we understand the value of our traditional laws and how they come from our language and how we can revitalize not just our forest practices, but our actual laws and our stewardship principles when it comes to applying those practices on our lands and beyond our reserve lands, beyond our community forest lands and replaceable forest license. We want this to take place across our entire nation. And so we have a resources group that works very closely with, we have 7 Canadian members, community members that are communities that fit within our entire nation. And so we have an ONA, the Okanagan Nation Alliance Forest Stewardship Group that come together and we work on building plans that can span across our entire nation while recognizing each community's autonomy to exercise our rights, our jurisdictions, and the localized ecosystems to our communities, so that we're protecting the lands and stewarding the lands and having that relationship with the lands in the most respectful way possible. So where do we start with reestablishing these laws is like I said, going back to our language. And so we are reinstituting traditional burning practices to help not just forest fire mitigation, but forest regeneration. Because as Dr. Hoffman mentioned, there's medicine in fire. And so it can regenerate the land, it can regenerate our spirits, and just create our own ecosystem really for ourselves, and we can not necessarily manage the ecosystem, but learn how to live within it within a respectful way. So when we start to revitalize these burning practices, it's called tikulaukum. Tikulaukum, if you think of the sound when you're lighting a lighter or striking a match, it's a sound. And so that is that igniting the land on fire to start to begin the burning process. So that igniting of the land is that first step in regeneration. And then as we kind of go through understanding those laws, we have to build what's called chaptu into that. So chaptu are what referred to as our origin stories, our original laws that were created, our morals and understandings and our practices and how things came to be, why chipmunk has stripes and why certain mountains are there where they're at. But that word chaptu refers to splintering. So if you think of your fingernail, when you have a hangnail, it splinters off. Or if you think of wood, when you're after it kind of pops with a fire, it splinters. So that splintering is the beginning. And then that tik is the aspect of the embers. So if you have that forest, that campfire picture, it has the embers burning and they burn into the air. And right before they kind of fizzle and become ash, they're tik. So they're at their hottest little peak and then they're just about to burn out. And then when we incorporate what's called pakpakt, our knowledge within that word pakpakt is how we refer to smart people. So sometimes when my elders are nice to me, they call me pakpakt, and it's always a good feeling. But what they're saying is that you have that ability to turn that little bit of an ember right before it fizzles out into warmth for the community. So you have that ability to harness that fire and turn it into a medicine that can benefit all the people of the community or the land itself. So, tikulaukum, chaptu, and pakpakt is a process. It's our word. When I say those three words separately, they don't really make sense. But when you think about them as a spinning ecosystem that works together, it's the beginning, middle, and then what can be for the future. There's not really an end. It's that regeneration. So with that as our kind of original mandate for our NRLP, our forestry group, it helps kind of implement our traditional practices. But then it's that regeneration aspect of it. What do we do after the land has been burnt? Or what do we do after the land has been forested? And so it's that replanting of the plants that were there before we, drove our trucks over there or even sawed some of those trees down. It's making sure that the land is brought back to health, not just to revitalize the forest industry, but revitalize the ecosystems that depend on everything that happens in the land. So making sure the berries are replanted so the bears come back and make their poop and spread more medicine across the land. And so it's that reconnection of the land that's really one of our strengths. There's strategies for revitalizing forest health that we really focus on, that intergenerational knowledge that I mentioned, from the very, very beginning to where we're at now, and how do we incorporate all the new knowledges, all the new peoples and ways of being from time immemorial to the point we're at now, to make sure that we're acknowledging that us as human beings have impacted the land in many ways. And so it's our responsibility as human beings to make sure we can renaturalize the earth in a way that's conducive to a more natural health, not a invasive species kind of health. And so there's lots of things that we continue to do. We continue to collaborate with folks like Agricultural Canada to make sure that when we do replanting of huckleberries, that they're doing all the studies to make sure they're aware of all the new pests that are coming around, the optimal growing areas for those huckleberries that we replant, and just so that we know that we're not unintentionally harming the land by trying to revitalize it in and of itself. But there's also just a number of challenges that we continue to face. First and foremost, the lack of recognition of our rights, our title, and more importantly, our responsibilities. The fact that we always tend to have to fight to practice what we've always been practicing. We talked about that image there at the end, that neglectful repercussions of massive forest fires that have overcome our communities and really impacted our well-being, and continue to impact the health and well-being, not just in BC, but across Western Canada and into Europe. And so we have to understand that, yes, it's important to revitalize a lot of these practices, but it might take a little bit of these devastating forests that kind of burn the land for us so that we can come back to it and revitalize, take that opportunity to say, okay, well, it's been burnt now, and we don't have to worry about these massive fires anymore. We can start to regenerate our burning practices. But again, it comes down to that seemingly silly responsibility to continue to fight for these rights and these titles and responsibilities. And then the aspect of intergenerational impacts, the disconnection from the land, being told that we're not allowed to do what we were supposed to do, and then that disconnection from our knowledge, and then trying to revitalize that, the impacts on our spiritual health, our cultural health, our economic development health, it all impacts who we are today. And then now that we want to capitalize on this reconciliation momentum, well, we're still behind the 8 ball, still trying to get our folks back on the land and getting them out there, and then feeling the threat of being pigeonholed into these little small mitigation effort pieces. It's a great success story. The Mount Law forest fire mitigation work that NRLP did is a success story in and of itself. But that's the work that should be happening across all of our forests, not just in our little community forest that we have on the side of the lake here in West Bank, but it should be taking place across all of our lands. And so, our company is working very closely with our other licensees to make sure that they're implementing traditional forest practices. One of our greatest strengths with our community forest is that it's an area-based forest tenure as opposed to a volume base. So it's managing the entire land base, not just the trees within it. And that is that interconnection that we need, like I said, from beginning, middle to end, and then regeneration so that it doesn't just stop after that tree grows and we harvest it once again. How do we continue to make sure that there's a forest industry, but life, land, love, and interconnected relationships so that we have elders and children going up into these spaces too. Even though they're still up in the forest, it's still important for us to get up there and have that reconnection. So there's plenty of work that still can be done. We continue to focus on those collaborations. We continue to celebrate the small successes that we've had, but we also continue to invest in forest health. It's the work that we do. When we are finished with the cut block, we revitalize that forest so that it's not just free to grow. It's we spend money, we invest on removing the waste from that forest so that it doesn't just continue to pollute the land there or just create a mess for someone else to clean up later on. So we as a company invest in that, and it comes at a cost to our bottom line. And so the stewardship practices are there, and we know they work because we're talking about it right now. But the fact that we still continue to have to go to these, to the province, or go to anyone that can really listen and say, hey, look, we're investing in this. Can you get support for us so we can do this, as opposed to throwing a blanket across the province and saying, can we all agree on this? That is not how forest health is going to be done right. We have to have a localized approach, and we have to understand that we have models that we can build from that are localized and really support interconnection with this forest so that we can get back to revitalizing our forest practices, our prescribed burning practices, but also revitalizing the land itself and our interconnection and responsibilities to it. So sorry for speaking so much and so quickly, but there was something there. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it back to Cody.
Thanks very much for that, Jordan. And great words in what you're sharing, and it very much rings true. And I know that's a lot of the things that I really consider too, is when we're looking at that disconnection to knowledge and land, and then as well, the lack of recognition to rights and titles, and how that can sort of be that cumulative snowball of effects of how that can limit, traditional practices, in which, like you talked about, the success story that you showed, that should be one of the things that's going on all throughout, our lands and territories. And unfortunately, there's barriers and hiccups to that. And then how do we sort of address that disconnection of land, the barriers in place, like you had said, recognition of rights and titles in order to get to that place. So thanks again for very much highlighting a lot of those components, not only the success story, but the barriers that come and then are in the realm of that as well. So I very much appreciate that. Now we will have our next speaker, and I am pleased to introduce Quinton Nelson. Quinton is the manager at the First Nations Emergency Services Society of BC, and he leads his team in assisting First Nations in developing First Nations communities in developing and sustaining safer and healthier communities by providing relevant programming and service. Quinton's work is very much guided in working closely with First Nations communities in BC to help build sustainable relationships and working together to address those issues related to fire. So without further ado, Quentin, I'd like to turn it over to you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Perfect. Thank you, Cody. Yeah, before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land with which I'm presenting and I reside on, which is the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I'm very thankful to be here. I'm glad to be part of this presentation. And what I'm going to do is just share my screen quickly. I'm going to do a brief slide with everybody, given the time frame. I can speak on this for a while, but I'm going to be echoing a lot of the points here that have been brought up by Dr. Hoffman and Jordan, but a little bit about myself. So I started out in the kind of wildfire suppression world. I spent 7 years with BC Wildfire on the suppression side, and like many who get out of it, looking for a little bit more stability in life. And so I'm fortunate enough to have gotten a job working with and for Indigenous communities throughout the province, but looking at it from another lens, wildfire mitigation prevention. So I get to kind of be on the other side of things rather than just suppressing fires. It's about learning more about it and how we can learn to live with fire. And it's kind of what's been echoed by the panelists previously. It's the need to apply good fire on the landscape through space and time is kind of, we need to revitalize that. And I will bring that up as part of my presentation today. So what I'm going to do is just go over kind of our mitigation department. So it's just kind of one department within Finesse, and that's what I look after. And I'll go over kind of our programs and initiatives briefly. And then I got a video I would like to share. It's just about 3 minutes with you guys at the end here. So just a little bit of an outline from our department and some of the programs and services that we go over. So some of you might be familiar with the Community Resiliency Investment Program. I'm going to look at our Indigenous Services Canada on-reserve operational field treatment and Fire Smart program, so kind of two separate programs. Look over cultural burning revitalization and prescribed fire, the First Nations Adapt program, coordinated training strategy, Fire Smart Home Partners program initiatives, integrated fire management planning, which is where we're going to take things at Finesse, and our community outreach strike teams, which some of you might be familiar with. So just briefly here, so the Community Resiliency Investment Program. So I can share the links in the chat after, but I'm not going to go too in depth on this. It can get pretty extensive, but essentially it provides funding to local governments and First Nations in BC to kind of increase community resiliency by undertaking community-based fire smart planning and initiatives that reduce community risk from wildfires. So there's a number of activities in here that are eligible. The program grows every year. You can see here, it started in 2018. We are just prepping for our 2023 launch, hopefully in the late spring, early summer. But you can see here that, lower risk class communities can get up to 50,000. Higher risk class can get 150,000. I know it kind of echoes George's point of it's kind of, it's not enough right now, but it's something. And that's definitely something I'm trying to advocate for too, is long-term funding. And I think that's where the integrated fire management planning will come into place in the future. And I'll touch on that further, but essentially here you can see that it's based off, the Fire Smart activities. So education, which is the foundation, right? Showing people what they can do to be proactive and manage their risk at not only their individual household, but their neighborhood and their community levels. It's about understanding that there are risks that we all face, living in BC with respect to wildfire. And that's just one component now, right? We got atmospheric river events, heat domes, etc. So this is looking after the wildfire side of things, but there's opportunities from each. And you can see it's vegetation management, legislation and planning, development. The list goes on. There's opportunities to do training and some emergency planning as well. When I send you the link, feel free to have a look on there. And then as you can see on this Fire Smart document where disciplines are, there's hyperlinks to dive into more detail about each section. Very similarly aligned to what we look after directly at Finesse is the Indigenous Services Canada operational field treatment and Fire Smart programs. So essentially, these programs are catered to Indigenous communities throughout BC, and they're focused on reserve opportunities. So the grant admin is provided by us at Finesse. And so with the fuel treatment program communities, we focus on moderate to extreme WUI threat communities. So they can get up to $75,000 to fund various fuel management activities on reserve. And kind of with the Fire Smart program too, we can get up to $50,000 to do various Fire Smart activities. And so working with the community. So before I got into this manager role, I started out as a forest fuel management liaison. So our department has just switched, actually our whole organization has switched to better reflect and align with the 4 pillars of emergency management. So we got the prevention mitigation department, preparedness, response, and recovery. And so with this, there's just a ton of opportunity to get funding and be able to work together. Like as I was telling communities previously, if you have, I mean, there's various things to talk about and bring up too, but if the nation capacity can support it, I always suggest working both programs simultaneously, the CRI and IS programs, because you can have essentially potentially double amount of dollars to get work done, you know, in a project year or in a 2-year period. So those are just opportunities in the short term. Long term, like I said, I'll bring up with the integrated fire management planning. And, you know, what's been brought up by the panelists previously is cultural burning revitalization. And so that's something we've spearheaded to as well at Finesse. And some of you might be familiar with it. And we do work with traditional local firekeepers as well to bring this revitalization forward. So you can see cultural burning has been carried out since time immemorial. So, you know, some common uses on the landscape for cultural and prescribed fire, you know, are not limited to cultural language revitalization, field mitigation, hazard reduction, which is the common one, food and medicinal plant gathering and access, which has been brought up previously, habitat enhancement, pest reduction, forest product access, right? So there's tons of benefits for cultural burning. And so what our team at Finesse is doing in partnership with other agencies and consultants is to work with the bands who are interested in revitalizing cultural burning and determine where and for what objectives they burned within their traditional territory. And the idea is to develop logical burn units for the long term and create shelf-ready projects so that when funding comes available, and so that's my job, is to get more funding and to make sure it's sustainable so that we can get these projects going on the landscape on the larger scale, more than, you know, a few hectares here and there. We want to see this going provincially, right? So this is what our group is looking at, and currently there's a pilot going on in the Southeast Fire Center with the 5 bands in the area to revitalize cultural burning. And as well, this is where that integrated fire management planning is taking place as well. So we got some big initiatives on the go right now, but I'm hoping it's going to bring some change to how we manage our forests on the landscape. Another program that we have going is called the First Nations Adapt program. So it's essentially a nationwide federal program, provides funding to First Nations communities to design a project that allows them to assess and identify future climate change impacts on their community and develop a community-based plan to respond and adapt to those risks. So, you know, some of the commonly identified risks we're talking about today is the wildfires, but we look at tsunamis, floods, sea level rise, drought, erosion, earthquakes. Now we got the heat domes, landslides. So the risk list is increasing. But here's just another avenue to get funding to do some projects as well. And this was a fairly new initiative that I worked to create, and I've been in ongoing discussions with BC Wildfire. But essentially, it's a different way of looking at training opportunities. The idea is to identify the kind of long-term needs of all the communities in BC. And I'm just going to step back for a second too and say, with our programs, we do see some Indigenous support in applying for these programs, but we have over 200 Indigenous communities in the province, and we're only seeing roughly 40 to 50 communities apply. So if you think about it, it's great that we got 40 to 50 communities, but we want to see it get to 200. That's only 25% of the communities that are engaged in these programs. that you know, but there's a number of reasons why, but we're always trying to showcase what we have out there, what programs are going on, how they can reduce their risk, how they can boost their community capacity. And so these are just a number of initiatives. And so with this strategy, the idea is to figure out the long-term needs and build this component where it can be delivered with some kind of process behind it to help Indigenous members become successful in their employment path at the end of the day. And this one you can see here is kind of geared to Wildfire, but there are some other initiatives. But the long-term hopes is that we can bridge the seasonal employment opportunities and turn what might be a 4 to 5 month employment through, say, a wildfire crew for the season to something that might be 12 months. And so if we provide a good flow and process of training throughout the year, then there's opportunities to do fuel management in the spring and fall. You can jump on the wildfire crews or our strike teams for mitigation, which I'll bring up after, in the summer and do cultural burning and Fire Smart and the planning and activities, because Fire Smart can essentially be done year round. But the idea is that we can bridge that, and so there's year-round employment opportunities, and then you keep the skills and the resources at the community level, and then we can work from there, and then communities can help neighboring nations with their capacity building or their own risk reduction or community resiliency for, you know, whatever hazards. So these are just some of the initiatives that we got going on right now. And part of this links all into the Fire Smart and Home Partners program, which essentially is the foundation of a lot of programs is Fire Smart activities. So you're essentially focusing on the structure and working your way out, value out, figuring out how you can reduce your risks. And so this is another key piece that's coming up in all of our programs. The Fire Smart program has been there. Home Partners is fairly new, but it's starting to gain traction. And this is where we're trying to work with insurance providers, and this can help in triage situations if we do run into more wildland urban interface wildfires, essentially. So the idea is, like I said from the beginning, it's about being proactive. Dr. Hoffman brought it up. Suppression's always been there. It will always be there. But the idea is to look at it from a different lens now, and we got to be proactive and manage and mitigate our own risks. And so the integrated fire management planning. So this is the video I have. I'll show in a bit, but essentially it's taking a look at. We're not looking at resources in isolation anymore. It's about looking at all the resources in the landscape, kind of at one time when making management decisions on how things are done. So you can see here, there's just some components, and the video highlights it perfectly in 3 minutes. So you're looking at wildfire mitigation as one component, but ecosystem restoration, wildlife, fish habitat, and water sources as well. And our decision support team at Finesse we have a slide ship decision support tool where they are spearheading all of this in a big mapping platform and spatial database that can be provided to Indigenous communities. So essentially for the Indigenous members and communities on this call, there's the access to that account is free for First Nations. We've been working with this to get that ability to provide the service. All you'd have to do is you could contact me, and I can put you in contact with our decision support manager who can get you set up. And the idea is you can have all this access or all this information accessible to you at the ready of your fingertips to be able to use and to work with our staff and use in funding programs, et cetera, just to help get these things done. But just a couple examples of managing for or accounting for multiple objectives on the land base, right? Public safety, ecosystem restoration, as I talked about, cultural burning, language revitalization, which has been brought up, traditional food sites, ARC sites, old growth and timber areas upon the 4 that I had mentioned here. So lots of opportunity. And then the kind of last one I just wanted to highlight is a fairly new initiative that I put together this summer, which is essentially the community outreach strike team. So the idea came from it's an extremely busy wildfire season. We've had 3 in the last 5 years. This next year could be just as busy, but the idea is to provide mitigation support. Everybody goes into suppression and working to suppress the wildfire. But the idea is here to flip the lens and provide mitigation support. So you'd work with the structural protection units, but essentially you take those fire smart principles and those what is essentially might be combustible around a home or property and move it out into the proper priority zones to try to increase that structure's chance of survival. And so these are some, this was a success story, for instance, here. There was combustibles that we're able to remove from the structure by our teams, and you can see the structure surviving. You can see how close the wildfire got. But so there's just lots of opportunity with this. We were able to pilot it in a number of communities this year, and it had some good traction. So the idea is that we're going to keep continuing this next summer and the summer after. It brings people together. We brought people. We brought some Cree members from Alberta over. We had some Yukon members come down and help, members from all over BC that were just interested in helping serve First Nations communities and provide some support. So there was lots of opportunity there. And so with that, I'm just going to stop sharing quick, and I'm going to do a new share for that video. So if it lags, there's a copy that Cody has that you could probably, if you download it, it's a little easier to see. So can someone just let me know if you can see this video?
Yep, you can see it.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing anything though. Quentin, we got no sound.
No volume?
No volume. Just trying to see.
I know there's something on here you have to hit the volume piece. You guys, are you able to share it maybe from your end?
Yeah, I'll take on the video here and share it from my end. Okay, let me cue it up.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
So let's see. Share. Video. Make sure that's checked.
In past and current practices, resources are often viewed in isolation and managed in pieces instead of being recognized as part of a larger interconnected environment. Leading with the traditional ecological knowledge of First Nations and backed by science, an integrated approach is the best way forward. Integrated wildfire management starts at the heart of the community. Once critical fire smart plans are in place, we focus on how to protect resources around the community and how to manage wildfire danger. At the same time, we take into consideration many other resource values that are crucial to the safety and survival of the community. Wildfire mitigation, ecosystem restoration, wildlife and fish habitat, water sources. These resource values and many others should be considered as a whole so that management can be integrated. Through integrated wildfire management, Finesse can assist and support First Nations communities in the collection of data and creation of planning tools that will aid in the protection and sustainability of these resource values. By looking at objectives for these resource values over time and identifying proposed outcomes, social, economic, and environmental, we are able to assemble data using stacked layers in our maps. When combined, we can identify potential areas with shared goals or collaboration opportunities, as well as areas of conflict that may be avoided. For example, here we see a forest fuel treatment and ecosystem restoration project overlap, so both projects can benefit from the same processes and data collected to obtain funding. Other values may include recreational areas, old-growth timber, commercial timber, areas with traditional foods, archaeological values, and more. Integrated wildfire management is a proven approach. With an investment of $50,000, our pilot project yielded over $4 million in funding for crucial large-scale land management projects, as well as many projects in neighboring regions. By working together and sharing the knowledge and data gathered, this process has the potential to unlock funding access exponentially, give First Nations ownership over data and planning for their communities, create ongoing local employment opportunities for community members, predict and prevent future emergency scenarios. Integrated planning works. Finesse is equipped with the tools and technology to launch this project across BC, and we are ready to support First Nations through every step in the process. Let's work together to plan a safer and sustainable future.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so that's currently being piloted in the Southeast right now with the 5 communities, and it's headed by one of my mitigation specialists. So this is, like I said, this is where we're going to take things with Finesse. Yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat.
Thanks for the awesome presentation, Quentin. I'm just reading what Dion had said, a lot of great and amazing programs that have been shared. And one of the things that really sticks out for me, again, is understanding that cultural burning and that revitalization. It's great to see, Finesse recognizing the importance and value of cultural burning as a way to not only revitalize this knowledge, but again, to use it to help manage the challenges around fire that we're facing today. So, it's a great piece, and thanks again for sharing. And I'm sure we'll have more questions for you in a short time. So finally, and last and not least, I'd like to introduce our final panelist for today, John Davies. John started his wildlife firefighting career in 1993 with the BC Wildfire Service Rapid Attack Team. He is also a graduate of UBC with a Bachelor's of Science Forestry and Resource Management. Today, he works as a wildfire management consultant that engages in all aspects of wildfire management. So looking from analysis to plans to prescriptions and operations and prescribed burnings and suppression, along with working alongside the provinces, communities, First Nations, and developers. He seeks to find practical means to reduce wildfire within communities, homes, and culture and natural values. So without further ado, John, I'd like to invite you to take the floor and share a little bit on yourself and your work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I am located in Vernon, in the unceded territory of the Sauk, north end of the Okanagan Valley. As mentioned, I've been in the fire world since 1993, where I spent 10 years with the Wildfire Service, about 5 or 6 of them on the ground, and the last 3 or 4 in the helicopter kicking people out. I was lucky enough to get my RPF in the early 2000s, right before the Philman report came out. I was involved doing a bunch of prescribed burning, primarily with Naquaqua at the south end of Anderson Lake there up in Darcy. And when Philman report came out, I was well positioned with my RPF and some burning experience and lots of operational fire experience to jump into community protection. And I've been doing nothing but that since 2004. And it's been great to work with a whole bunch of different First Nations in that regard, as well as a lot of communities throughout BC, Alberta, both territories. And I was even over in Indonesia for 3 months helping out over there. I have a short presentation here that's going to provide more of the Western aspect of fire, with a number of operational projects that have been completed, both for ecosystem restoration purposes and objectives, but also as a means to protect the community, both at a small scale and a landscape scale, as has been mentioned as being necessary. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. And maybe you can let me know if you see that there.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you.
Looks good.
Yeah, so first of all, I've gone through my almost 30 years of working on fire, and it's been expressed already with a previous panelists, but also you know, everyone's pretty aware from the media that we've had some pretty big years since 2017 and 2018. We had a bit of a lull, 2019 and 2020 in fires, but last year we had some devastating fires, and I spent the last 2 months of the summer working for Okanagan Indian Band there in their Emergency Operations Center as their ops chief and fire branch coordinator, trying to protect the community from the White Rock Lake fire. So I saw firsthand some structural losses and the whole reserve having to be evacuated. So it was a pretty horrible summer. And as has been mentioned, you know, it's just continuing on these big fire years. And you know, before 2017, 2018, as you can see on this graph, area burned. We hadn't seen the biggest year previously was 1958, and I think 2021 has probably passed that. So as been alluded to, 3 of the worst years have been in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's likely to continue with climate change, and the reason you know, we need to be so concerned about this is that we have a whole bunch of homes all through the province, both on and off reserve, that have built up against wildland fuels, whether they be forested or grassland, and we keep pushing those developments further into that wildland and creating this interface wildfire risk that we have to deal with year after year. And so to understand how we can try and mitigate this risk, it's important to have a very fundamental understanding of fire and fire behavior. And if you've done any firefighting, you'll recognize this triangle in the middle. It's the fire triangle. Remove one of those elements that creates fire, and you can put fire out. But in wildland firefighting, we also have another triangle. It's called the fire behavior triangle, and that's the yellow one you see on the outside. And when we're trying to reduce or otherwise alter fire behavior, we try to have an effect on one of those other aspects, whether it be weather topography and fuels. There's not much we can do about topography, changing the land, but you know, we can do some micro site adjustments on weather with relative humidity and precipitation through using water. But primarily what we get focused on in both suppression and mitigation is trying to do something with the fuels on the landscape to either put a fire out or reduce fire intensity. And so what we end up having is a fuels problem on the landscape pretty much throughout BC. And this is a result primarily of poor land management, where we have taken upon ourselves to exclude fire from its natural role in the ecosystem. I'm sure everyone on this call will understand that wildfire either is an integral part of ecosystems, whether it be through regeneration or just through maintaining open forest types. And because we've, for all the reasons you see listed here, we no longer have First Nations doing traditional use burning, which was an integral part of the ecosystem. And we continue to push development out and put other values like on timber that requires pretty much us to try and exclude fire as much as possible, as we've done for decades. And that has resulted in this substantial buildup to an unhealthy level of forest fuels. And over time, through this fire exclusion, we have taken these open stands, certainly in the Okanagan, Thompson area, where we had high crowns and low density trees with not a lot of surface fuels. And by removing fire, we've allowed a buildup of understory trees to occupy the sites and to create dense stands that are both unnatural and unhealthy, and are resulting in the fires that we see today. And what the resultant effect of that is to move what would have traditionally been a low intensity surface fire in the stands you see in the top pictures there, to these catastrophic fires that we're starting to see year after year that are posing risk to our ecosystems. And we no longer have these open forest conditions where we would have had fast moving grass fires, but not a lot of heavy fuels that would have created these big fires. And so what we need to do is get fire back on the landscape and try and return these stands, restore these stands to their more historical condition. Here's an example from the Okanagan. The picture in the above, this is Kalamalka Park, Rattlesnake Point. This is, I think, a picture from the early 1900s, possibly around 1930. And the picture in the bottom is one I took a couple years ago. So you can see that through the exclusion of fire on this western aspect in this provincial park, we have basically turned these grasslands into a dense forest condition. And then we plunk campgrounds and fire pits and stuff along the beaches and homes all around it. And so we're creating this risk ourselves over time. And to turn this back, we have to engage in fuel management, and it's been mentioned a couple times already. And we need to be out on the landscape manipulating this fuel loading. And we try and address it in the three forest fuel layers that exist out there. The crown fuels, which is the treetops, surface fuels, anything that you would have to walk on or walk over as you were hiking through the bush, or flatter fuels, which are dead branches, live branches, small trees, shrubs, etc., that would carry a fire from the ground to the ground. And the way we implement fuel management is to try and affect one of these fuel layers or all of them through either reducing canopy fuels, ladder fuels, or surface fuels for a variety of means. And this does not mean that we go out there and we completely remove all the trees on the landscape or on the treatment area. And here are some photos showing some typical fuel management projects that we've done in the past. The top pictures are in Headley, which is in between Carametus and Princeton, if you're not familiar with it. The bottom one is up by the Princeton Airport. And you can see that there's a significant reduction in the number of trees from the pre and post treatments, but still a lot of trees left behind. The canopies of the trees are raised up, ladder fuels are removed, and there's not a lot of surface fuels left. So a much lower fire behavior would be expected in these stands. Here is a more mature and older stand. The top one is in Tulameen, which is just north of Princeton and northwest of Princeton, and the bottom one is Missoula Lake, which is northeast of Princeton. And again, you can see the high crowns, low surface fuel on the ground there, and not a lot of ladder fuels, but still a lot of trees left on the landscape. These treatments were very small scale. They were within 100 meters of private land values, and they were probably about a decade or 12 years ago that we did these, and at that time everything was pretty small scale. But as we've seen over the last couple of years, the wildfire risk exists at a landscape scale, and that is really the scale that we need to address it at. And Quentin mentioned that we need to be looking at developing these treatments at a much larger scale, and moving more towards large fuel breaks. And here's some schematics of what a fuel break around a community should or could look like. And what we're talking about is trying to take these untreated heavy fuels that are immediately adjacent to homes and trying to reduce the amount of fuel there, either by creating a fuel break, which is completely void of any fuels, or what's called a shaded fuel break, which has some density of trees left behind. And in the right-hand picture, you can imagine if a fire was moving through what they've labeled as an unmanaged hazard, it would hit the shaded fuel break where there's still trees left. It would reduce its fire behavior because it doesn't have as much fuel to burn. And the idea being between that fuel, the shaded fuel break and the fuel break, if that one exists, firefighters would be able to anchor their suppression tactics safely and try and keep this fire from getting to the homes. And it would be approaching the homes at a much lower intensity because it has less fuels. And there are numerous examples both in the US and several in BC, where this has successfully occurred. This is a wildfire down in the States. Treatment occurred between the yellow lines you see, and when the fire came over the slope and down towards the community, which is the bottom of the picture, it moved into that treated stand and dropped out of the crowns onto the ground, and the firefighters, as you can see from the text on the left, were able to attack the fire successfully. And there are a couple examples in the Okanagan here where we built fuel breaks, and they've protected the community. One of them was the Thomas Creek fire in 2020 down at south of Penticton. The fire that was done about 2008 with Penticton Indian Band, and yeah, 2012 the fire burnt into it and dropped down on the ground, and the firefighters, structural and wireline, were able to successfully action that fire. Another one was last year on the White Rock Lake fire. We had a big fuel break around West Shore Estates, just south of the Okanagan Indian Band Reserve. And again, it deflected the fire and pushed itself away from West Shore Estates. A couple other ones just to illustrate that we're not removing all the trees out there. This is at Mount Baldy Ski Resort. The fire in the stand in the background there was a result of a early 1900s fire that ripped through here prior to the ski resort being there. And so it was a very, very dense stand, very difficult to walk through. And we actually, I saw there was a question in the chat. We actually implemented this landscape level fuel break with the ski resort, Osoyoos Indian Band, and Gorman's, who provided the equipment. They were local licensee in the Okanagan. And we removed about 20,000 cubic meters of wood out of here. And the residents were very thankful for the reduced fuel loading around them. This is another one. It says Mount Baldy, but this was up at Big White. And again, we worked with Interfor on this project, and it was all done by mechanization and the removal of merchantable timber. This is just south of Peachland, a project we did with Penticton Indian Band. It had an ecosystem restoration focus, and it was done in collaboration with Gorman's as well. Again, mechanized timber removal. More fuel was left on this site because they're planning to burn it, and I believe they actually started that this year. So it was a critical deer winter range in here, and so the idea was to try and leave some overstory and come through and burn it to try and enhance browse. A couple more here. This is the south slopes of Kelowna. So this is the remnants of the forest that didn't burn in the 2003 fire. And again, this was done with Gorman's, I believe, and some other contractors where there was timber removal. This photo was taken a year after. And so you can see the grasses that are coming back through here. And this is what it looks like with a drone shot. So quite a few trees left in different configurations, either individual retention or small patches. So as mentioned, the intention is to try and create an environment that will only support a surface fuel, a surface fire. And I have a number of photos here. This is actually the prescribed burn work I did with Naquaco at the south end of Anderson Lake back in the early 2000s. Again, winter range and spotted owl habitat. And you can see from the fire intensity here, you can get right up against the flaming front. Well, in this instance, we're lighting it, but you can get in and have a suppression safely on it. This is one we did late afternoon once the winds changed, and so it was backing down the slope. Another example, same area. So lots of heavy fuels were left because we were intending to come in here and burn it. So we're reducing those. There's my fire dog. And again, this was more of slash reduction work as well. And a little pre and a post, not the same slope, but the same stand. So you can see that we have consumed a lot of the smaller debris. And in this process, we had a lot of vets with fire scars in them from previous fires. And so we had to engage in trying to protect those trees through a combination of raking combustible material away from them and wrapping them in aluminum foil type material, a fire shelter. And then we burnt around them. So that is it. I'm happy to take any questions or pass it on over, and hopefully I didn't take up too much time. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, John. What a great presentation. I got to say, I love the fire dog, you know, having a companion out there while you're doing the work. Just need to ask, what is his or her name?
It was Dendro, short for dendrology.
Oh.
Named it after my forestry professor at UBC.
Cool, that's awesome. But yeah, thanks again for that great presentation. I know it's really good to be able to see the importance and value on those fuel treatment plans and the ability to help with fire, and then looking at, again, seeing those examples of fire maintained ecosystems. It's always good to see that work in motion and action. So I appreciate those pieces there, and I'm sure we'll have some questions and comments for those soon. So that follows it up for our many kind of speaking series and / presentations from our panelists. And now I want to jump into the opportunity now to view or have some questions from our audience and have our panel discussion. So first and foremost, I just want to take a moment just to sort of go over the themes again for those that may not be too aware or might not remember much from seeing the original flyer with this. The real themes that we were hoping to tease out in a lot of this, again, is looking at our relationship with fire. So being able to, for example, see things through an Western Indigenous lens, seeing it through those positive and negative perspectives. The other kind of theme that we're hoping to tease out in a lot of our discussion today too, is looking at those previous wildfire seasons. We've had great discussion on that so far through all of our presentations. And I'm starting to ask those questions of why are they so big, or what really drives the severity, or, you know, what are those trickle down effects and impacts on the environment, and where do we go from here? What does it look like for the future? The other piece and portion as well that we hope to really have covered with our themes is looking at fire stewardship, you know, exploring cultural and traditional burning, First Nations knowledge systems. And I think Jordan did an excellent job on highlighting a lot of those pieces there, and is including those barriers to it as well. And then the other final theme that we're hoping to really tease out, and again, this was really well demonstrated in the presentations, is gathering those personal experiences as it relates to knowledge and fire. And again, this is very much open. I want to reiterate that this is not only open to our panelists to answer, but we want to hear from our audience as well. You know, what are your experiences with fire? What are the questions you have? So, you know, the floor is open. I ask individuals now, if you'd like to raise your hand, you know, unmute your mic and be able to share some words, or if you'd like, you can type it in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll be able to have a little discussion. So we have actually a first question here we have from David Ho, and I'd like to present this to the panel now. The question is, how can we engage the logging industry and bring them to the table to this discussion? So I'm opening it up to whoever may want to tackle this first.
I can maybe jump in here. As I mentioned in the presentation, I've done a bunch of this with different licensees, and really it's in the examples of the projects that I've had, it's been driven by a need to remove overstory trees at such a level that it wasn't practical to stick them in a pile and burn them. It would also resulted in too much fuel on the ground to try and lay them down and prescribe burn them, and it would have left too much of they wouldn't have been consumed. And so there was a need to work with the licensees to have a means to send that wood somewhere. It also required, at the scale that we were doing these projects, many of them were several hundred meters wide, and 100 hectares plus, and it wasn't something that could be practically done by hand. It needed the use of machinery, and licensees have access to contractors. And then but the objectives were driven by fuel management and community protection. And it wasn't about fiber removal for the sake of trying to feed a mill. So there were other objectives and values that were in play that were driving the project. But there was enough volume being removed that it was of interest for the licensees to be involved. To their benefit, it was also accessing fiber they would otherwise have a difficult time acquiring the social license to go after. And so by bringing the project driven by other objectives and other stakeholders and shareholders to them, it was kind of an easy button for them to get involved, and it was a good community opportunity as well. So all the examples that we've done, all the projects we've done, it's been driven by other means, but we needed them to help do it because of the scale.
Thanks for sharing, John. I appreciate that. And building off that, is there anyone else that would like to jump in on that question as well and provide your knowledge and expertise?
I'm happy to comment a little bit on that. I think that we're having a lot of issues with the annual allowable cut and this expectation that we're going to get those trees growing to 80 years with our current wildfire situation. We're just not going to make it there. We're not going to make it to kind of the mature stands that we're hoping. And so we need to have like a real, honest conversation about what fire suppression and those cumulative disturbances like mountain pine beetle and wildfire and wind are all going to do to the broader land base. I mean, we need to have discussions about losing 3.5 million hectares of trees and how that's not, going to be inevitable again in the future. So I think shifting the reality of what we expect from the forestry industry in BC is huge, and just understanding that we have more trees on the land base than we've ever had before, but it's not natural. It's because we've been suppressing every single fire and every single cultural ignition that's happened in the last 100 years. And so rethinking our landscape, to what might be more natural, like 200 stems per hectare instead of 2,000 stems per hectare, I think is kind of a wake-up call for the forestry industry.
I think that kind of segues into, we're not managing the landscape for the best values. It's almost always about timber once you get outside that immediate interface. And if we were putting different values on out there, then I think we would have a different attitude about integrating wildfire into our forest management policies and regulations. And I agree, we don't have the right approach.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in real quick and just support the words. That's exactly it. We got to change the scope of the work that needs to be done, the reality of the situation, and again, knocking it out of the park there, Doctor, about the forest health and the lack of the neglect that's been taking place. The forests that we see today aren't the same forests that we had 200 years ago. And we have to understand that. And again, it goes back to that understanding the ecosystems themselves, all the little creatures within our stories. It's all the little creatures that are the heroes of our stories. It's not the big bears and eagles that save the day. It's the little tiny creatures that come and rescue us. And so when you understand that interconnection of ecosystems, so that you're preserving, wildlife habitats that really protect things like woodpeckers, as opposed to trying to get rid of all the pine beetles. Just let nature take care of itself and foster nature. But it's, how do you engage the logging industry into that? That's going to be a difficult uphill battle, because it's already mentioned. It's all about volume, and so we have to understand that forest health and that the survival of the forestry industry is dependent not on logs, but on the actual ecosystem that supports the forest. So we have to understand the realities of that. So just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing your words on that, Kira, and as well as Jordan. I know that's a big component that we really have to think about going forward. And the words that really stick out for me, and I guess the theme of that, is really rethinking our landscape and what does that look like, right? And pulling from those knowledge systems to really help make that come to life. So, getting there again is half the battle when in this work, though, as we know, right? So, I guess we'll jump into another question or comment if we have one. And again, the floor is open for our guests if they would like to raise their hand. Please do so, and we can have some more conversations continue. And if not, I have a few of our own questions through Leo that we'd like to chat about as well too. So one of the questions then I want to really bring up to our panel here, and relying on your educational and work experiences and lived experiences, is there a fire myth that you want to extinguish today? Everyone here is this great wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure there's many of those myths out there that we're completely buying into that may not be entirely true, or that we really need to reframe our thinking on. So I wanted to throw that to our panel now to really shed some light on those, if there's any big ones that you come across in your field or line of work.
I'll start and hopefully not take up too much time. More firefighters is not the solution. That's not going to be what gets us out of this. It's more mitigation work. It's more ecosystem restoration work. Putting fire back onto the landscape at a meaningful scale. It's not about more fire trucks and air tankers and that all can be helpful, but it's not the end all solution to this. And we have 6 other months of the year. There was a really good diagram Dr. Hoffman had on there about that with the circle, with the different times a year and what we should be doing. And I mean, that's just great. We have at least 6 to 8 other months of the year that we can be trying to mitigate wildfire and the risk to communities, and that's when we should put in the time in. And Quentin also brought up, there's very limited amount of money available to do this, and at the scale we need to do it and the cost per hectares that we're experiencing, we can't do it at $150,000 per community on an annual application process. It needs to have meaningful money put to it, committed to it at a multi-year level. And perhaps these integrated wildfire management plans, when they come out, can have 3 or 4 or 5 year schedules in them with budgets, and that can get the community money over a longer term, so that they're not tied to fiscal. They're not trying to do prescribed burns in one season and have it not materialize until the next fiscal, and they don't have the money. There are lots and lots of problems with it, and I think that I'll stop there.
Thanks for that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kira.
Oh, I was just going to chime in and, speak about kind of the wildfire risk mitigation stuff. One of my experiences working with Indigenous communities is that, and non-Indigenous communities too, is that wildfire risk mitigation is the #1 priority. I think that that's not a lot of people's priority. It's actually kind of a thing that can be on the back burner for sure, and it's always a threat. But when many communities don't have clean drinking water and they don't have basic infrastructure for their communities, it can be really, really hard to think about wildfire risk as kind of this future thing that's coming. And so, not everyone has the capacity, and again, it's speaking to that fiscal year, and it's like money is put at communities to kind of like build capacity in the short term, but again, it's like not always for wildfire risk reduction. It's like we need to build up communities and empower communities to make the decisions about what they need. Like maybe it's teaching and training and all these other things to use fire in a good way, and not necessarily engage in risk reduction, within their communities, but maybe they want to do it on the broader land base. And so maybe that's just, again, it points to that Indigenous led solutions and the need for that. It's just that it's not always the Western has to like come in and say, well, like here we'll like tackle this problem. I'm instead, you know, just asking, how do you want to tackle this problem? What do you see the solutions are? You know, and maybe wildfire is not the #1 priority in communities. And so just kind of understanding that.
I would say from my side of things, what I hear often is that the myth that we like to say is all prevention activities are expensive, which is why we don't get adoption by some into the program. And it's simply not true. There are a lot of things that you could do yourself that are low risk. You know, they just take a little bit of effort, right? It's you know, you talk about protecting the values and reducing like you know, structure loss, you know, it's focusing on the heart and working your way out. And it's the simple things of being aware of like combustibles, like moving firewood away from your house during wildfire season, keeping your gutters and your roofs clean, free of litter and debris, you know, lawn mowed, right? Just, it's a lot of simple things. I think it's, what we see is people think it's immediately like roof replacement, my siding's vinyl, it's not hardy plank, you know, got to do that right away. I don't have the money to do that. And, but you don't have to start that way, right? And so part of this too is like we do these local fire smart representative workshops. And part of that, we talk about myths, kind of debunking the myths and what we would commonly hear. So those are just a few aspects from our end there.
Quentin, I'd like to add to that and to pat, give you and Vanessa a pat on the back for these strike teams that you had last summer. You know, you're right. It's simple stuff that can protect homes, and really all we're trying to do is stop those homes from igniting and give firefighters a chance. And that last summer, it made such a huge difference on Okanagan Indian Band Reserve, because there were a lot of homes that when they were triaged for structure protection, were written off as not being homes that could be saved through with the fire departments. And your crew came in and did some really simple stuff around these homes, moving combustibles away, cleaning out eaves troughs, getting the needles off of the roof, and moving combustibles away from the house. And after that, after those teams were through, the fire department came back through and reassessed those homes, and I think almost every single one of them received a sprinkler system on them, or were had their status changed from non-savable to defendable, and it was all really simple stuff that the crews did, and it was meaningful and it made a difference. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that program will be continuing this year, because I see it being a successful one through time.
Appreciate that, John. Thanks. Yeah, it's a valuable program for sure. And like I said, just ties into the points and the principles of what Fire Smart is and can be too, right? It's a lot of things you can do to be proactive yourself.
And thanks for sharing that, everyone. And I just want to make a note too, just, you know, noticing that we're a little up against the time. So I just wanted to throw it out there that if anyone is willing to stick around, whether it be, you know, our panelists, or I understand that some people have places to be, and that's quite all right. If anyone does want to stick around for a few extra minutes to, you know, cap off our conversation and whatnot, and as well with our guests, you know, if you're willing to stick around, we can answer, maybe have 1 or 2 more questions. That being said, completely understand for those that may have to make their way out. So I'd say maybe we'll go till maybe around 12:10 for those that want to stick around and maybe get an extra question or 2. That being said, we do have a few more questions listed, so I'm going to document these questions and we'll share them out, hopefully with some answers as well, with the follow-up document, which will include the recording. It'll include some great links and resources from our panelists today, and those questions like I just mentioned. So just letting everyone know, and understand if you have places to be, that's quite all right. But I guess we'll continue on for a few more minutes just to cover some questions, and then I'll close the session off as well. So I guess one of the more final questions here I want to share is comes from the chat. Would anyone want to comment on climate change and how that might affect wildfire and fire cultural practices going forward?
I'll start. I feel like I'm, I don't like silence, so I spoke up. For us in West Bank here, with our resources group, it goes back to that prevention. What can we do to prevent and plan for climate change? So it goes into our replanting processes. What trees species are we planting? Understanding that growth patterns are shifting, and so how do we replenish the forest with what we put back in there? That's going to be sustainable should there be a fire, but also preventative so that it mitigates those fire risks as well. So yeah, it's as much prevention as we possibly can, understanding that the earth is getting a little drier. It's also documenting the data, I guess you could say. In one of our community forest areas up near the Big White area, there's just numerous of little creeks and streams that flow through there that aren't labeled, aren't documented, but they're crucial to the forest health, especially when it comes to fire prevention. So understanding that there's data that's not being considered. So we take it upon ourselves to collect it, and we share it when it's appropriate to share. But it's knowing the land in and of itself, so that you know what you're going to protect, remembering what it was beforehand, but being willing to adapt our cultural values and our cultural ways to where we're going in the future. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Just saying, oh yeah, we want to plant more larch in this area as opposed to pine. It sounds simple, but what is the true value of a larch tree compared to a pine tree? Not just, again, going away from the idea of a log, but as a resource to the forest. So I'll end with that.
Maybe I'll just jump right on that adaptive management, because I think that's so important. One of the nations I'm working with, we were discussing where to put the berry burns in the fall. And they're like, okay, well, immediately we can't use the places we always used to burn because they're too low down. We need to start moving them up slope, to adapt to obviously this rapidly changing climate. So I think that, that experience and that knowledge comes again from just knowing the land, and also just, being aware of the changes, of the phenology changes and everything, and how things are coming earlier. We were just at a burn last week in Cranbrook. It was the end of March. That's just like completely mind-boggling to me. So I think that we just need to, again, we always need to check ourselves and where we're at and how things are constantly changing. I have to jump off now, but it was really lovely to meet all of you and hear your experiences and perspectives. And Darlene, I'm sorry that I won't be able to hear your closing remarks, because I really enjoyed the opening. So thank you very much, everyone. And I look forward to, if anyone has any questions, I'm always open for an email or a call. So thank you.
Thanks, Kira. We'll be in touch.
Maybe I'll just add a bit of the Western science of that. I showed a triangle in my presentation on fire behavior, weather topography, and fuels. And weather is driven by temperature, or the weather aspects, the components of it that drive fire behavior are temperature, wind, precipitation, and relative humidity. And so as we get warmer and drier, we're only going to increase fire behavior. It just moves into those mathematical calculations that drive fire behavior. And so we're having, when I started fighting fires in '93, I got hired for May 1st, and I was booted out by mid to end of August. And there are crews now that are starting late February, early March, and they're working right through till October. That's in 30 years. So, the fire seasons are starting sooner, ending later. They're hotter, they're drier. It's having an impact for sure. And as we move into these treatments, Dr. Hoffman's right. We have to consider that these grasslands are going to be moving further up in elevation than that they probably historically occurred, and we shouldn't be going. We need to take that into account with our prescriptions.
Okay, thank you, John, and then for sharing your words and adding to that as well, and all the panelists here. unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut it there just for, respecting your time as well as our guests and everyone here. So I want to say a big thank you to, Jordan, John, Quentin, and Kira, and being able to join us today to provide their expertise and their knowledge. It's very much appreciated. And, some of these questions we'll have as well, because we do have a few in the chat and as well as the Q&A section. So we'll be able to share these out through our follow-up document, which will be coming out. So in a way, we'll still hear more of those great responses, but yeah, we'll have to move on from here. So the last piece I want to show before we end with our closing is just the follow-up to the activity that we had put on, that we had asked everyone to participate in. And unfortunately, we won't have a lot of time to really dive into the question component of this, but I think it's really good just to begin to highlight like some of those responses Lou said. So again, looking at what are those feelings that are starting to come forward? What are those thoughts? What are those senses, the sounds, the smells, anything that you can really relate to when you had seen those three images. So as you can see here, we have our word art that really puts a little bit of perspective into those images and trying to tease that information out. So quite a unique mix, because you can see we have cozy listed, scary being some of the things as well, hazard, heat, controlled fear, dry, revival, music, community. So all of these very much blend together to, trying to showcase, what encompasses fire, and then again, bring it all full circle. What is our relationship with fire? So unfortunately, we don't have much time to really speak on this again, but we will be sharing this graphic out as well. At the end is a little bit of a piece back to our panelists and our guests, and we will be doing the draw and announcing the winner later on as well for this unique piece. So following this, and I want to turn it over now to Darlene again to sort of wrap us up and send us off in a good way.
Thank you, Cody. Been listening to this presentation, and I found it very, very interesting, and see the challenges that First Nations people are facing, and the wisdom which we tried to share with those who are in leadership that could probably make some decisions, but it's an ongoing thing where there's always struggles and not an understanding of ways of being for First Nations people. So presentations like this are very valuable to every community, and also it probably will bring people on board to be a part of the LEO program, the network, which is very, very interesting and very positive. And Dion, I've been on virtual platforms with Dion, and she's expressed about the LEO connection. And today I finally got it. I finally got it after all said and done. So that's great. And it's kind of like, oh, geez, maybe I should be a part of this. But yeah, but in any case, we'll close this wonderful 2-hour presentation. Cody, you did a wonderful job. You present well, and the 4 panelists expressed very well, and it was understood. And yeah, so it's like when somebody thinks about something and it starts to be expressed into action, we now know what we have to do. So in saying that, maybe if you can all just bow your heads for a moment. We ask the dear Creator and the grandfathers and the grandmothers and all of our ancestors to come be with us in this closing prayer. As this a beautiful day and beautiful presentation comes our way, thank you for all that has taken place. Thank you for all the participation. Thank you for all the knowledge and wisdom shared. As the winds bring a change of weather, they also bring a change of how to do best practices for all those concerned. We thank Creator for guiding us on the good red road of instituting plans that will work on making us whole in all aspects of who we are. as the sun is high in the sky, warming us in the coolness of the northern energy. It touches our spirit, asking us to come into the wisdom of our hearts. We thank Mother Earth for allowing us to walk softly on her, leaving no footprints. May all those present go home knowing what you've received today will benefit all. Creator, we ask that you keep our people safe today, and may tomorrow be a good day. Creator, hear our prayers. Creator, hear our prayers. All my relations must see. Thank you.
Big yawa, and thank you again for that, Darlene. We appreciate you sending us off in a good way, and wrapping this up is how it should be done. So again, I just want to say a big thank you for Darlene, a big thank you to Quentin, Kira, Jordan, and John for providing these excellent presentations, and we'll be in contact soon just to discuss a little more further on some certain things. And I also got to give credit to a big thank you and a big credit to the team behind the scenes on this. It's not just me alone that is doing this. You've seen Dion pipe up with some questions and jump in to share some helpful things as well, which is very much needed in this space. So I wanted to very much highlight Dion Sanderson, who is our Environmental Contaminants Program Coordinator at FNHA's Environmental Public Health Services team. She's been a great help with this, and we work very closely in this project with the LEO Network in BC. And as well, I have to highlight Emma Scott, who is the Program MS Officer at FNHA's Environmental Public Health Services team. She basically, keeps Dion and I in line when it comes to this kind of work and all the tech and organization of this. So just a big thank you to everyone involved in today's event. We will be in contact with some follow-up events, follow-up documents that'll highlight a lot of the work that we've done today. With that being said, my contact information was listed on the flyers as well. If anyone who has any more information about or wants any more information about the LEO network or LEO in BC, or getting in contact with any of our presenters, I'm more than happy to help make those connections and answer any questions that I can. So with that being said, I just want to bring a close to today's event. Big yawa to everyone, and thank you. And we'll be seeing you soon at our next virtual gathering. Thank you.